Hey people, it's your midsole man, Eddbud here. Today we're heading out onto the trails for an initial review of the Asics Fujispeed 2. Carbon plate equipped. Does it hit the mark on the road and the trail? This could be that winter-ready beast that I've been looking for some speed training when things get slippery. Let's check it out. Thanks for tuning in people. Today I've got an initial review for you of the Asics Fujispeed 2. Brand new trail shoe here from Asics with a carbon plate in that midsole. This is the bright orange and antique red colourway. It's clocking in at 160 earth credits here in the UK. This is a shoe that Asics have fired over to me for review, but they're not vetting my views before my valued viewers get to see them. At 160 it makes it one of the cheaper carbon plated shoes you can actually get out there. I have 293 grams here in my UK size 11, US 12. That's 10.3 ounces old money. I measure the midsole heel stack in my pair at 40.5 millimeters, and in the forefoot we got around about 35 millimeters. I did do a Shore softness durometer test here. We've got about 34 in the Flight Foam Blast Plus material in the midsole, and the outsole rubber comes in about 63, so it's certainly on the more rugged side. This is Asics grip on the outsole this time rather than the Asics high abrasion rubber or the Plus variant. You know this stuff will survive an explosion in a nitroglycerin factory. So it should be okay for some trails. In terms of width, we got about 11.5 centimeters in the widest point in the forefoot and only 8.2 in the heel there. It's certainly given me some Asics Metaspeed Sky vibes about it. Similar drop, similar shape, perhaps a slightly more durable outsole here. Let's check it out in depth. Before we get into the review, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up like. It really helps out. Danke schön. We'll start with the upper first. As I say, this shoe does borrow from the Asics Metaspeed Sky Plus. Certainly in terms of that actual upper material, it really is quite flexible. There's also a few hints here of the Nova Blast 3 as well, if that's one of your favourite shoes. The tongue is practically taken from that shoe. It does a good job here. It's pretty much long enough to cover any lace tension that you may have. It's sort of one of those winged variants here, but the rest of it's made up of some very flexible mesh. It's pretty thin. There's only padding really where it's needed. There's a little bit of reinforcement around the toe box area here. I wouldn't say that it's substantial by any means. This is meant as a sort of faster paced trail shoe. There's a little less protection perhaps than some people might actually need on their trails. Mine are pretty standard sort of trails really. I've got some compacted dirt, some loose stones. Very dry though at the moment out there. We haven't had any rain for some time. There is though a more substantial heel counter here in the Fujispeed 2. A lot of the weight in the upper of the Fujispeed 2 is actually located back here in the rear section of the shoe. I think Asics are trying to make this shoe to be as light as possible for the trails. I think if you're running some more technical trails, you might want to look for something that's got a little bit more protection in the upper. The lacing system though does create a really nice wrap around the foot. I found it easy to get a good lockdown. It's kind of a mixture really of some traditional eyelets and some of those lace loops, and you do have this cool little sort of lace garage here. You've got some excess laces, you can just stick them under there. The laces here are that perforated style that we did see on the Metaspeed Sky. They grip those lace loops and eyelets very well, and I didn't find any sort of excess pressure at all on the top of my foot. I did use a runner's knot, but I think you could probably get away with just using a standard bow. I didn't have any heel slip whatsoever. It was a really kind of locked in, very controlled sort of feel. Now, part of the tongue is slightly gusseted. It does stop a few sort of lace loops down. I think that's designed to try and stop dirt and debris from getting into the shoe, but it does help a little bit to actually wrap the tongue around the foot. I did find the upper perhaps slightly roomy. I did have a little bit of bunching, certainly in the toe box area, but it didn't really cause me any discomfort. So perhaps if you do have a slightly narrower foot, then that could be something you need to consider. I think I find laces are appropriate in length here in the Fujispeed 2. There's not too much excess lace length whatsoever. I would rate the shoe as true to size. Go with your standard Asics size. I wouldn't suggest either that the toe box is gargantuan in terms of the height. I find a lot of trail shoes, they're just a little bit overblown. There's a bit too much room there for me. This one's pretty much just about right, considering what it's aimed for. I think in terms of the upper, you'll find it's breathable enough. I wore it in some very humid and very warm temperatures, though I think it'll be quite good at letting moisture out, actually, if you're going to use this in the autumn and winter months. I'm sort of looking at this one as being something that I can utilise in the rotation a little later this year, when things start getting a little bit wet. Changeable weather is what we always have here in the UK. We'll get a couple of days where it's baking hot like it is right now, and then things turn for the worst. And that'll be the end of the summer. Very enjoyable though in the upper so far. My initial runs, I'll give it a 2.8 out of 3. Midsole, midsole, midsole now. So midsole wise, as I mentioned earlier, we've got Flight Foam Blast Plus. I reckon there are several different formulas of Flight Foam Blast Plus. They all seem to be different from the Nova Blast 3 through to something like the Gel Nimbus 25. The one we've got here is a little bit firmer, a little bit more resilient. They've probably done that to actually make it a little bit more durable for those trail routes and efforts. Asics are using it on loads of different shoes as well. It does show that it's actually quite a versatile foam. It's certainly a little bit firmer, a little bit more resilient. I think the average score I've got on those Shore durometer tests is about 28. So this one's coming in a little bit towards the firmer, sort of harder side, but not by much. There's certainly some bounce and propulsion here from the foam, but I think that's also down to the carbon plate. I also found it a very stable shoe out there on the very dry trails. There's certainly some uneven camber there, and I didn't feel sort of unstable at any point. And being a giraffe-like man with a very high centre of gravity, certainly on trails, I do feel that quite often. I think the shoe really begs to be run at some speed though, and when I did start to run a little faster, it did feel better. I think the shoe's reasonably nimble really, if you consider that it's sub 300 grams in my size, and I've got a bigger foot. It's offering a huge stack here without that sort of bulbous heel feel. I think Asics perhaps have placed some thicker paint and coatings on that Flight Foam Blast Plus to protect it a little, but the actual function of the foam here still pretty much acts as you found in the Nova Blast 3. There's some real nice bounce there. I wouldn't say it's squashy, but it's pretty resilient and it just throws you forward. Very forgiving, in fact, on some gravel and some very dry, grassy areas. I think you always want a bit less squash anyway when you're running at speed. These could be excellent perhaps if you're on some more open trails. Perhaps if you're doing an event where you're going between road and trail. I always found the Nova Blast 3 though soaked up a little bit of that energy rather than giving it back to you. I think the Fujispeed is a little bit more forgiving from that point. I think it does throw a bit more back in. I just wouldn't buy this shoe if you're after doing some slower runs. Certainly that more narrow sort of area in the midsole of the heel. It's one that wants you to get your cadence going, be landing on the mid to forefoot. So for some very technical sort of sloppy trails, probably not the best shoe. It's a responsive ride here. I got a little bit of a pop from that carbon plate when you toe off. It just rides the line very well between being very forgiving on foot, but capable of some real drive when you put the effort in. I think it's no surprise that Asics have released this shoe right after we've had the Ultrafly from Nike. That's a Pebax based midsole, albeit wrapped in some other material to try and protect it, yet it does seem to come in much heavier than this Asics Fujispeed 2 model. I think, is there any real advantage if you've got Pebax foam yet it's been wrapped up in something else and you've got all that extra weight? It just feels like you're nerfing the shoe a little bit. I think the Asics shoe is more centered at very fast trail activities, but I have to say I really enjoyed running in it on road as well. So if you perhaps got to commute from one place to another, from your standard routes to your trail, you shouldn't have a problem with the Fujispeed 2. In fact, I had no issue running some faster reps towards the end of my run, a few 200-meter efforts and stuff, and it felt absolutely fantastic on road and pavement. There's a lot of viewers that have testified that Flight Foam Blast Plus shoes have lasted them for hundreds and hundreds of miles, so I see no issue that we'll have here with this one. I think the midsole's going to come up pretty hardy and stand most lighter trails. Debris and hazard shouldn't sort of rip it up too much. I'll give it a 2.8 out of 3 so far for the midsole. Outsole now. Ow. I gotta say I'm very impressed with the Asics grip here in the Fujispeed 2. I love the design as well. They've tried to sort of hollow out as much rubber as possible, but still leaving you with a nice area of traction. Bringing down the weight there, but without the heft of all that extra rubber. Again, it works really well on trail and on road. I don't think the rubber cutouts here are deep enough either to take in too many small stones or sort of bits of debris. In fact, there's hardly anywhere for it to collect up. It does make you wonder why some road shoes don't use this very same sort of ethos. That would be fantastic. In fact, I didn't even have to dust it off. It looks great. I was on some gravel, compacted mud and forest floors, and there's just nothing there. The lugs almost look a little bit like ninja stars or something. They're all over the forefoot and the heel area, except this sort of section around the arch, which is probably there to help with a little bit of torsional sort of flexibility. I always find that the difference between a trail shoe and a road shoe in terms of the upper, the midsole and the outsole can be very, very small sometimes. I think Asics have towed the line very carefully here. It's a really nice balance. I found it great on some loose gravel and dirt, but still very comfortable on some concrete paths and road. And I don't see where you can't use this as a more winter resistant shoe for training later in the year. And I think it's going to be quite easy to clean because there's very few nooks and crannies here for the dirt and debris to collect up in. I do like the fact that the lugs kind of stretch the full length of the outsole as well, right back into the curve of the heel. I think that's going to provide some extra durability and longevity. They have placed a few channels in the sort of forefoot there and the heel to perhaps allow moisture to pass through. As I mentioned earlier, it's bone dry here in the UK at the moment, though I think that's going to change tomorrow. So there's lots of things here about the Asics Metaspeed Sky Plus and the Nova Blast 3, but yeah, this is very much its own shoe. I see this being my winter plated trainer. It's got those sort of magic speed vibes about it, but a far more versatile outsole for my local routes. I'll give it a 2.8 out of 3 for the outsole so far. It's just extremely versatile. Value now. So when talking about value, around about 160 here for everything this shoe's got to offer, I think it's actually pretty good. We got an expanse of rubber here on the outsole, which works very well. You got a carbon plated shoe with some very forgiving foam, and also that wonderful sort of up for it race-like profile of the upper and the midsole. And also for a trail shoe, it's super light. Something coming in, you know, sub 300 grams for me for the trail is amazing. Some of those overbuilt trail shoes that I've tried in the past, I just feel like I've got massive clogs. Like, it feels like I'm wearing a tank on my foot. I just don't need that, you know. I don't have that type of build, so this fits in really well for me. If you're a perhaps lighter built runner or a taller runner perhaps with larger feet, you want something that's not going to weigh you down, the Fujispeed 3 is right up your street. I have to say the shoe's well built out the box. I've not got any weird glue marks or sort of poorly put together pieces. It doesn't feel like a Friday afternoon model, that's for sure. I think you get a real bundle of things here in terms of value. A carbon plated shoe, but with this level of traction for the trails is really, really good. I think you got to do the maths on this versus something like the Ultra Fly, which is coming in way heavier. Are you going to get any real significant benefits there? I'm not entirely sure. This is coming in about 1.4 ounces or about 39 grams lighter than the Exodus Ultra 2 from Saucony, with a little bit more pop, perhaps a little bit more focus on speed as well. So horses for courses there, really. You might want a little bit more protection, but I think for me and the types of events that I would do on a trail, this is ideal. It's just fitting my physique a little bit better, and that's the physique of a stick man. So one for the lighter trail runners. For me though, it's a value score of 3 out of 3 at this price. I think it's fantastic value. Does lots of things and covers lots of different bases. You could run some races in this due to the weight. Training in the winter on road and pavement. I think it'll dry out pretty swiftly as well. There's only a bit of padding here to soak up any moisture. A versatile tool for the rotation. 3 out of 3 for value. If I've added the scores up correctly for the Asics Fujispeed 2, that should give us 11.4 out of 12 after my initial runs. Real surprise this shoe, very, very impressed. Asics really hitting the mark on a number of different models recently. Is this one you're going to be picking up soon? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. Musical interlude time. Today comes from Mac DeMarco's album 2. I can't believe this one was released 11 years ago. That seems bizarre. I can't even comprehend that that is the case. This one's got a fantastic lo-fi vibe to it. Some of the tracks even sound like they could be the backing to like a sort of 90s hip-hop track. Some amazing drum sounds here, super dry, but the production itself and some of the songs are just so good. Tracks to check out are Robson Girl. That's got a wonderful groove to it. The bass is like really thumping as well. It sounds like Mac DeMarco's using some sort of muting or something on the strings. Cheryl as well is really great towards the end of the album. But I think for me the highlight is the very last track here. It's almost like a demo, like he's just pressed record and then sung this song, almost whispered it into the microphone, which is called Still Together. It is a beautiful song, really great sort of a sentimental, emotional, romantic love song. And when you got some of these funny, kind of almost boasting kind of tracks earlier in the album, you've got this very last one, which is a very romantic, sweet piece. Go and check it out, guys, Mac DeMarco's album 2. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the review of the Fujispeed 2. I've certainly enjoyed running in it, and I think I'll enjoy running in it in the future, and that's where I'll be spending the rest of my life. Hit that subscribe button and click the bell for notifications. Also give this video a thumbs up like and share it with your running buddies. My name's Eddbud, and I'll be seeing you